All right, continuing my Magic Halloween series, let's talk about spirits. So, spirits in magic can mean ghosts, and there can be different ways ghosts manifest on different planes. But spirits in magic can also more broadly be defined in terms of like nature spirits and things that are not necessarily ghosts, but are like intangible and ethereal. In early magic, we saw a lot of variety. We had Will-o'-the-Wisp, we had a haunted scimitar, banshees were even defined as spirits, and I think are continue to be defined as spirits. We had a whole ghost ship. And then we got into like nature spirits. We had sea spirits and all sorts of different spirits in this vein. And then there's, of course, the infamous Lemure, where the artist misunderstood it as lemur. This is why giving your artist solid art direction is really important. And then we even just have like these scary spirits. This is a Kravican horror. If you remember, I talked about the Kravican vampires. Bad things happened in Krav during the Ice Age. Let's just leave it at that. And then, of course, there are spirit guides, which may or may not be defined as fairies in other worlds and other fictions. And then we have something like Spirit of the Night, which was sort of a Voltron of 3 different horrible spirit things that you can use to summon this card, which, a 6/5 for 9 sounds reasonable. And then, of course, we have ghosts. Just any kind of ghost. But let's get into some of the more unusual and interesting stuff. So Sarah built her angels from the spirits of fallen warriors and things like that. So when we had Urza's Saga, we got angel spirits of a kind who are, I guess, either proto-angels or more ethereal angels at Sarah's realm. And then, of course, we have the Kami from Kamigawa. So there are the sort of baseline Kami. These are the spirits who can reside in anything or are just a natural part of the fabric of the world. They generally appear very abstract and have a number of like items floating around them and are made from like sort of abstract stuff. And then we have the dragon spirits who are protectors of the world. They are more closely aligned with mortals than a lot of the other kami are, with the exception of Okagachi, who's like the big overarching dragon spirit, who's like the biggest kami of the plane. And then we have like the Myojin, who are like the big kami. These are the big, powerful, important ones. We also have demon spirits called Oni, and these come from sort of a separate place than the kami do. On Ravnica, just like with vampires and zombies, we see different ways spirits are used by different guilds. So the Dimir will use spirits as like operatives because they can pass through walls and go unseen. Where the Orzhov will bind spirits, like when you signed an Orzhov contract, your term often continues after your death and they will work your spirit. But also the really powerful of the oligarchs will be able to live beyond their natural lifespan as well as spirits. So they get to stay rich forever and keep you indentured forever. There's also sort of more regular ghosts, some based on like Czech folklore like Rusalka. And even the Azorius use spirits. They use them as like ushers and bailiffs and things like that, like administrative kind of jobs. Going back to Dominaria with Future Sight, there was Blinking Spirit earlier on, which I didn't show. Now we have Flickering Spirit. We don't exactly know what this is, but it's sort of this weird, unique thing. We also have real Lemures. And some of the spirits on Dominaria are like the people with shadow who sort of got caught between the phases of reality during the Phyrexian overlay in the first Phyrexian invasion. Skipping over to Lorwyn, where elementals function a lot like the kami on Kamigawa. We got these sort of semi-divinities that are spirit avatars who were sort of the gods of the plane. With the new Lorwyn set, we have actual gods of the plane that have sort of evolved since then. We also have other interesting things like the swans of Bryn Argol, Banshee again in the spirit, and interesting things like Spirit of the Hearth that sort of feels like an elemental of the plane, but is more like conceptual. I don't know if there was literally a flying lion that became this. On Alara, there's surprisingly few spirits. I just wanted to call out the Bant spirits we've seen, which are sort of they're called the Sovereigns of Lost Alara. They're the Sovereigns of the past, but they manifest in the clouds, which I thought was a cool idea. On Zendikar, we see a couple different kinds of spirits, vampires who persist after death. But also, like, the Moldaya have, like, this ancestor magic, and Obun was, like, a ancestor who still sort of leads their tribes as a ghost. On Innistrad, we basically, the spirits are ghosts, called Geists, and we essentially have two kinds of Geists. We have, like, benevolent Geists who sort of keep their purpose after death, and we have Geists that have, faded after death and lost their identity and started to turn evil. Or if not evil, they are not benign. And there's a reason they don't cremate, because spirits will then become these fire poltergeists. On Theros, you remember we had the Returned as their zombies. Well, when a Returned emerges, their Eidolon splits from them, and it is like the soul portion of them, the other half of them that they lose. And the Eidolons sort of just also go about life without purpose, really. And you see a lot of examples of these throughout the set. On Fiora, we've really only seen one big spirit, and that is Brago, and he was made by Custody Magic, like this sort of political affiliated cult that wanted to extend his lifespan, and they sort of succeeded. On Chandalar, the Onaki are these ogre spirits who were bound in their temple, and to specifically the Chain Veil, the thing Liliana finds early on in her story. On Tarkir, a lot of the spirits are based around Abzan magic, and they manifest from kidden trees as like these sort of sand entities. I think this is one of the cooler takes on ghosts here, that they manifest their physicality through sand. And we also saw dragon spirits here. We don't really know what this is. There's no lore on this. On Ixalan, vampires can persist after death, and they become like these sort of smoke entities if that happens. But what we see a lot more of when we returned to Ixalan were echoes. These were the ghosts of the core, and they usually have their spirit bound to an item, usually made of cosmium or something like that. And so that's why when you see them, there's often like a real couple pieces of clothing or whatever that make up the spirit, because that's what they're bound to. On Urborg, on Dominaria, a lot of the spirits got reinvented as these sort of Studio Ghibli-esque, like almost cute and fanciful spirits, and it's not sure how many of them are ghosts versus these other kinds of like ethereal beings. They're almost more Tim Burton, I want to say. They're more like the Nightmare Before Christmas kind of spirits here. On Shenmeng, the Plain of Mountain and Seas, when we had our set there were a number of creature spirits. I'm just going to show a few of them. And they have a lot of cute variety here. They function not entirely like kami, but they're like folklore creatures that are also spirits. Vivian Reed's magic, her arrows create these animal spirits that manifest from her arc bow. And usually these are the spirits of animals that she has killed or that were dying and that she used her arc bow to save the essence of. Eldraine has your regular spirits, but one of the cutest ones I just wanted to call out really are the Sorcerer's Brooms from the rather famous story, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And we had one of the sort of mini stories, Johann, in the new Wilds of Eldraine, that sort of tells the story of these things. On Kaldheim, Istfel is the sort of mundane realm of the dead, where your average spirits who don't get into their equivalent of Valhalla go. And they just sort of exist there. On Arcavios, the Strixhaven School of Lorehold will reanimate spirits using statues. Then they're sort of bound through the statues with their identity intact. And that's so that they can learn about the past directly. And then I'm running low on time, so Duskmourn has the glitch ghosts who look like an old TV screen glitching out. And that's because they're usually pushing in from outside the house, and they get warped that way. They're called glitch ghosts. And then finally, we have the new spirit dragons of Tarkir. who were created and shaped using a magic ritual implied to be from Ugin originally. And that's it for spirits. I almost ran out of time.